I used to work the graveyard shift at a gas station off a seldom-traveled highway. Surrounded by dense forest, the station was the only sign of civilization for miles. It all started on a Thursday evening. As the night crept on, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a leaky faucet. I remember I tried to lose myself in a book, hoping to forget the unease I felt. Around 2 a.m., the bell above the door chimed, a sound that should have been impossible since I hadn't heard a car pull up. I looked up, expecting to see a customer, but the doorway was empty. I shrugged it off as a trick of the wind and went back to my book. Minutes later, the bell chimed again, more insistently this time. I stood up, my heart beginning to race. Peering into the fog, I could barely make anything out of it, but I was sure that I saw a figure standing at the edge of the light's reach. I walked outside and called out, "Can I help you?" The figure didn't move or respond. As I watched, it simply faded back into the fog, as if it had never been there at all. Shaken, I tried to convince myself that I was tired and had imagined the figure. Some minutes passed when I jumped as the phone rang. I picked up and hesitated before answering. "Hello, Gas and Go?" I said. First there was silence. Then, after a few seconds, a low, distorted voice whispered, "Look outside." The line went dead. With trembling hands, I hung up the phone and edged toward the door. Peering into the fog, I saw nothing, just the empty, silent night. I was about to turn away when I saw it. A shadowy figure moving slowly between the gas pumps. My breath caught in my throat. The figure moved slow and strange, circling the pumps as if it was searching for something or someone. I backed away from the door. Was this some kind of sick prank, or was I in real danger? I decided to lock the door, securing myself inside the tiny cashier's booth. I watched the cameras, but the fog made it impossible to see anything. The sense of being watched, however, grew stronger by the minute. As I stood there, I swear I could hear some sort of tapping sound. But at this point, I was paranoid and didn't know what was real or not. Then I stopped the music that was playing. That's when I heard it. The subtle crunch of gravel, like someone was pacing back and forth in front of the station. I took a few steps inside the station, trying to distract myself while checking the locks on the doors and windows. The sounds continued. My pulse quickened, and I found myself inching toward the front windows to peer into the fog, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. That's when it happened. I looked away for just a moment, checking over my shoulder. When I turned back, my heart leaped into my throat. I saw a man pressing his face against the window. His eyes were wide and unblinking, and he had this freakish, scary smile stretched across his face. It wasn't just the suddenness of his appearance that scared me. It was the look in his eyes. It felt demonic. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. There was no time to think. I grabbed the phone, dialing 911 as quickly as my trembling fingers allowed, never taking my eyes off the man. He remained there, smiling, as if he was enjoying the terror I felt. During the wait for the police, nothing really happened. The whole time, while I was waiting for the police, the man stood there with his face pressed against the window with his weird-looking smile. The police arrived quickly. The man didn't try to run. He just stood there, as if he was waiting for them, his smile never fading for a moment. The officers recognized him right away. He was a local troublemaker with a history of weird, sometimes threatening behavior. As they took him away, our eyes met one last time, his smile finally giving way to an expression I couldn't quite read. The whole incident was over, but the image of that smile haunted me for a long time. Later, I learned that he had been wandering the area, looking for his next target for whatever twisted game he was playing. Knowing he was off the streets brought some comfort, but the memory of that night, the sounds, the anticipation, and that final terrifying smile remained in my mind. The thought of what might have happened if the man had taken action kept lingering in my mind. I never thought working the night shift at a gas station could turn into one of those horror stories you hear about but wish you hadn't. Yet here I am, hoping someone will believe what happened that night. It all started with a knock, a slow, deliberate knock that didn't match the usual late-night door chime or the sounds of cars pulling up. It was around 2 a.m., the time when the world seems to hold its breath, and even the crickets outside seemed to pause their nightly concert. I was behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, fighting the heavy blanket of boredom that the night shift wraps around you. That's when I heard it, a knock, soft but clear, coming from the back door. A door that led to a storage room, a door that customers never used, a door that frankly hadn't been opened in months. My first thought was to ignore it, but then it came again. My heart kicked up a notch. "Who's there?" No answer, just silence. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept under the counter. A poor excuse for protection, but comforting nonetheless, and edged towards the back door. The fluorescent lights of the gas station cast long shadows, turning familiar shelves and mops into specters watching my every move. As I reached the door, the knocking stopped. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Do I really want to open this? I thought. Curiosity won over caution. I unlocked the door and swung it open, the night air brushing against my face, cool and slightly damp. Nothing. Just the empty space behind the station. I stepped out, the door swinging shut behind me with a soft click that sounded too final for my liking. Is anyone out there? No response. I scanned the area, the beam of my flashlight dancing over empty cans and weeds that had made a home in the cracks of the pavement. Nothing. Convinced I was just spooking myself, I turned back towards the door, ready to brush it off as a trick of the mind or perhaps a local trying to mess with the new guy. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a knock this time, but a shuffling sound coming from the side of the building. My heart skipped. The bat felt suddenly very heavy in my hand. I rounded the corner, the light of my flashlight leading the way, and there, in the beam of light, was a figure. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, hunched over and rummaging through the trash can. "Hey!" I called out, more out of surprise than any real authority. He stopped, slowly turning towards me. The light caught his face, and my breath caught in my throat. There was something off about him, something in his eyes that didn't seem right. They were wide, too wide, and they gleamed with a light that wasn't just the reflection of my flashlight. "Can I help you?" He didn't respond, just stared at me with those unnerving eyes. Then, as if deciding I wasn't worth his time, he turned back to the trash can, resumed his rummaging. I stood there, unsure of what to do. The logical part of my brain told me to go back inside, lock the door, and forget about this. But another part was fascinated, drawn to this strange figure in the same way you can't help but stare at a car crash as you pass by. Then, the man stopped rummaging, his body stiffening. Slowly, he turned to face me again. This time, he just didn't stare. He took a step towards me, and then another. I should have run back inside, locked the door, and called the cops, but my feet felt glued to the ground, my entire body tense with anticipation. What was this feeling? Curiosity? Fear? I couldn't tell. He was close now, close enough that I could see the details of his face. His eyes weren't just wide. They were frantic, darting around as if he was seeing things I couldn't. His mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, a whisper, so soft I had to lean in to hear. "Help me." The words sent a chill down my spine. "Help you? How?" He reached out, his hand trembling. It was then I noticed his clothes, tattered and stained, as if he'd been wearing them for weeks. His fingers lightly touched my arm, and he whispered, "They're watching." I glanced around, the beam of my flashlight scanning the darkness. There was nobody there, just us. "Who's watching?" He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, his expression one of pure terror. Then, without another word, he turned and ran into the night, disappearing into the darkness as if he'd never been there at all. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was likely only a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I finally turned and made my way back into the gas station, locking the door behind me. My mind was racing. Who was that man? What was he afraid of? And why did he come to me for help? I didn't have much time to think about these questions. The rest of the night shift passed in a blur of anxiety and paranoia. Every car that pulled up made me jump, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see the man again. Or, worse, whatever he was running from. My shift ended, and I told my colleague about what happened last night. I drove back to my house, got some sleep, and later that day went back to the gas station for my shift. What my colleague told me still disturbs me to this day. An hour after I left, 3 men entered the gas station, looking around as if they were searching for something or someone. They were wearing reddish-like suits. They walked around the store, not even glancing at my colleague. Then, without asking, they went straight to the public toilet, and from there directly to the supply room, which is, of course, off-limits. My colleague knew this was bad, so he just locked himself in the cashier booth and didn't dare take action. After about 5 minutes, one of them said, "We accept your command, Lucifer," and they all left. After the incident, my colleague called the police. As you might guess, we never found out what was really going on, but I can't shake the thought that something really disturbing and sinister was happening. Working the midnight shift at a gas station was never my dream job, but as a college student, it paid the bills. My name is Jake, and this is the story of one night that turned my normal side job into a scene straight out of a horror movie. It was a particularly quiet Monday night, the kind where the silence is almost deafening. The clock ticked past 2 a.m., and I was halfway through my shift, counting the minutes until I could head home. The only company I had was the soft hum of the refrigerator units and the occasional flicker of the overhead lights that needed replacing. The first eerie moment happened without warning. I was restocking some shelves when I heard a soft thud outside near the dumpsters. It sounded like someone, or something, had knocked over a trash can. I paused, straining my ears to listen, but all I could hear was the beating of my own heart. Curiosity got the better of me, and I grabbed a flashlight, stepping outside to investigate. The cold air hit me like a wall, and I shivered. I made my way toward the sound, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. As I neared the dumpsters, I saw that one of the cans had indeed been tipped over, its contents spilled across the ground. I scanned the area, expecting to find a raccoon or a stray cat. but there was nothing. Just as I turned to head back inside, I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching on the gravel behind me. I whipped around, flashlight darting across the empty parking lot, but there was no one there. A chill ran down my spine, and I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. The night returned to its previous stillness, and I tried to shake off the feeling of unease. I went back to my duties, occasionally glancing out the windows, half expecting to see a face looking back at me. But there was nothing. Hours passed, and I had almost convinced myself that I had imagined the whole thing. Then, around 4 a.m., the silence was shattered by the bell above the door, signaling a customer. I looked up to see a man entering the store. He was tall, with a thick coat pulled tight around him and a hat pulled low over his face. Something about him set off alarm bells in my mind, but I pushed them aside.
"Can I help you?"
I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at me from across the store. The air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Then he began to walk toward me, each step deliberate, echoing in the silence of the store. My heart raced, and I instinctively reached under the counter for the baseball bat we kept for emergencies. Just as he reached the counter, the man stopped and finally spoke.
"How much for the gas?"
His voice was rough, almost a whisper. I let out the breath I didn't realize I was holding and told him the price. He nodded, laying a few crumpled bills on the counter before turning and walking out, never once making eye contact. I watched him go, pumping gas into an old, beat-up car before driving off into the night. After he'd left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the night's events were somehow connected. I don't know why, but I had this unnerving feeling that something was terribly wrong with the man. An hour passed, and I was sitting behind the desk, trying to distract myself with some YouTube videos when I heard the bell again. Looking up, I saw the same man standing there, but this time he was covered in mud, as if he had been in the woods. His return was a huge red flag for me. Trying to keep my cool, I asked if I could help him with anything. He didn't respond right away. Then he asked if we had a shower. I was taken aback, but told him we didn't. That's when I noticed something red on his shoes. It took me a moment to realize they were bloodstains. Panic set in, but I knew I had to keep my composure. He just stood there, staring at me. Then slowly walked up to the cashier, stopped, and took some gum. He placed it on the counter and asked,
"How much?"
Trying to sound calm, I said,
$2.
He paid and walked back to his car. As soon as he left, I quickly wrote down his license plate number and called the police, giving them all the details. A week passed when I was watching the news and saw the man being arrested for murder. Apparently, he had killed his wife and had her dead body in his car, burying her somewhere nearby the gas station. The news mentioned that thanks to an anonymous tip that night, they were able to catch him. Till this day, I'm still wondering if it was my call that helped,